Hello again, world, and welcome back to episode 4 of The Top Split. I'm your host, Alex McKellar, and this is where we try to bring you a little news, views, and other interesting bits and pieces from the iRacing world. I'd like to kick off the episode once again by thanking you, my audience, for tuning in. We cracked 1,000 downloads for the podcast recently, and for someone who was aiming small, it was a very pleasing and satisfying milestone to pass. 1,000 is probably not much for the likes of the Joe Rogans of the world, who I believe do upwards of 100 million downloads per month. But for someone like me who speaks to a very small community, I've been amazed at the response so far, and it's spurring me on to keep going with this little endeavour. Moving on to the episode at hand, my guest today was none other than Nim Cross Jr., who many of you will no doubt be aware is the iRacing chief steward, which I would think is a pretty thankless task, but one that I think Nim does remarkably well, I have to say. I wasn't sure what to expect with Nim prior to us speaking, as other than a few encounters on the track, I hadn't met or spoken with him until today. Surprised is probably not the right word because, as I said, I didn't really have any preconceptions, but I was really impressed with him. He's a really thoughtful and articulate guy, and if you listen particularly to some of the things he talks about when we spoke about his background, he really looks at things from many angles and really comprehensively, for want of a better word. Really, a really in-depth thinker. Now, that's someone I don't mind having the steward's hat on, I must say. But without any further delays, I give you iRacing Chief Steward, lifelong gamer and deep thinker, Mr. Nim Cross Jr. All right, so I'd like to start off by welcoming iRacing's Chief Steward, Mr. Nim Cross, to the show. Nim, welcome aboard.
Thank you, Alex. Good to be here.
Thanks, mate. You've just been watching the sprint cars online. How was the racing tonight?
Oh, it's good. Anytime you get the World of Outlaw sprint cars racing, you're watching that live, it's a good night.
Yeah, mate, plenty of action there. And, of course, that's coming to the iRacing service pretty soon, I think. The big question I'm sure gets asked all the time is it too far away now?
I hope not. Everybody in the office and everybody involved is working very hard to get dirt right and to get it to a point where we can release it. Hopefully it's not too long. Obviously, I don't have an exact date. But I can assure you that there's nobody who's looking forward more to getting it into everybody else's hands than the people at iRacing.
And I bet none amongst them more than yourself, judging by your interest in the sport outside of work too.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's something that I've been looking forward to and fighting for a long time. And I'm big into sprint cars and dirt track racing in general. My son and I, we go to about 70 races a year, and it's just my passion. And the great thing is that the dirt track racing and the driving and everything it is translates well to what we're doing. And it's actually come out a lot better than I even anticipated when we were in concept. So I'm really, really excited about it.
That's awesome, man. Awesome to hear, and great to hear the passion in your voice and obviously around the office. So I'm sure the end result will be, hopefully in line with that passion. And I'm sure if you guys are proud of it, then it'll come out really well. But moving on to your other roles, or your primary role, I guess, at iRacing, am I right in saying that Chief Steward is your job title?
Chief Steward is my job title, and that is my primary role at iRacing.
Yeah, cool. And I'm guessing that's a very time-consuming role, but that you might get to do a bit more around the iRacing office as well. Any other jobs that you take on around the office?
Anything that's needed, basically. Now that I have some help, we just hired Mr. Tyler Hudson, and he is somebody who helps me, and he does a lot of other helping throughout the company. But now that he's on board, I'm able to continue doing other jobs. I'm involved with the dirt track stuff, and also any other type of testing that needs to happen. Pretty much anything that any department asks me to do, I'm there to help out. And I don't always get asked a lot by a lot of people, but whenever I can, I get involved in testing, and we try to do whatever we can. We definitely enjoy doing the protests and taking care of customers and taking care of certain issues, but it's a lot of fun helping out with development also.
Yeah, I bet. And from what I understand, you're probably living out every gaming kid's dream in that you were and are a gamer who's now working for a gaming company. It sounds awesome to me, even as someone who's long given up on that sort of dream. But can you tell us a bit about how you came to be working at iRacing?
Yeah, I definitely am very blessed. I started, I had a passion when I was a kid as far as gaming goes. I used to make board games, and these are the days before computers. So, I was a guy who made racing board games, and as a teenager, whatever. And I used to have groups of people come over to my house twice a week, from as far away as 30 miles, and we would have game nights and race nights, and we would keep points. And I always like to think that my board games were more simulations than they were games, and that progressed, and computers started to come out, and I started to get involved in gaming companies, and I started actually Papyrus. I started help beta test with them, and I would call them and get more involved, and they would actually allow me to do more for them because I would pester them, I guess. And they actually gave me some tools, and I used to work on the AI, and I, with their permission, I released something called NIMS AI for the NASCAR games and stuff like that, which was made in basically a mod for the AI, so the AI raced more realistically, and went on from there to help them out some more. I started doing some work for some other gaming companies that wanted to pay me to do the work. At that time, I was beta testing for Papyrus, and I did that, gained some experience. I worked for Turtle Beach for a while, which was the audio company that now, and I ran their support department. Created a website called the Virtual Racing World. That was a role-playing game that was outside of the Papyrus NASCAR 2002 and 2003 games. And I made a role-playing game around those games where we had car owners and drivers and things like that. And you wouldn't be able to drive in the series until you were hired by an owner. And the owner had to pay for all damages to the car that you did. If you nicked a fender or something like that, the owner had to pay a cost. Any fines that the driver had, the owner had to pay for. The owner had to pay a salary for each driver, and then the drivers had to go out and earn positions to help pay for their salaries. So if you had a real high-paid driver, an owner paid a lot of money for you, which we would have an auction. That's how the owners would get the drivers. So if you had a real high-end driver, the owner has to pay a lot of money for you to get you, and you would have to go out and possibly you would have to finish top 5 just to make the owner profitable without wrecking his car.
Well, it sounds to me like that's the I don't know, the genesis of fantasy sports, mate. You're ahead of your time.
That's pretty much what it was. It took a long time for me to come up with it. I used to sit around the campfire. We were down Summit Point, and I would just throw ideas out to people and see what they thought and stuff like that. And we used to, everything was Sunday was qualifying day, and we used to sit on in a practice session, and we used to live time trial every car, where everybody would sit in the pits, and you would go out when it was your time to qualify, and you would have to do it in front of everybody, and there would be an audience there watching, and because we were doing the first live streaming at that time. Mr. Dave McCall was the first person ever to do live streaming of any kind on any race, and he was in the league, and we kind of made the first need for that, because we had people that were car owners and such, and people that were playing the game that didn't even own the simulations. And they would watch on the live streams, and, they would have their cars that were out there, and they would see them qualify. And, it was just good stuff. And then, if somebody wrecked the car and they had to pay for damages, people would get fired during the seasons, and new people would get hired. And there was just a line of people there waiting for rides, because you couldn't drive until you got a ride. It's not like you just come in and drive. You have to be hired by somebody.
Yeah, no,
And
that's full on. That's like, such in depth gameplay behind the scenes. The game within the game. It was, how popular was it? Did people get right into it alongside you?
yeah, it was pretty popular. I mean, I was a guy. Well, and I had a lot of people helping me out as far as people that were interested in the league and stuff like that. We had magazines, we had all kinds of articles, people writing. I had officials. I had all kinds of committees to do certain things like replay reviews and stuff like that. And so there was a lot of people helping out, and we had about 500 customers, and they were basically members. We had 3 different divisions that we did, and and it was pretty much all I could handle as a guy just running a league, that kind of thing. Well, what happened, how that translates into where I am now is Papyrus was about to close their doors, and John Henry, who is the owner of iRacing, he saw what I was doing about a year before we started iRacing, and he basically he liked what I was doing. He said that I was at the top of the game of what I was doing, and that he would like to talk to me. And we talked, and I shared with him my passions. He shared with me his, and he asked me to come work for him, and I went to work for him, and we started working on iRacing, and I was a part of iRacing about a year before we actually opened or started iRacing. And once iRacing started, I was running the QA department, helping out with development and things like that, and design and all kinds of ideas that everybody had, and implementing them, and helping out with all that. And when we went live is when I switched over to the chief steward role.
Yeah, look, I can hear the passion in your voice again, and I imagine that's potentially what he saw when he brought you on board. And you're talking to a history that goes way back from a gaming perspective. And I imagine if you weren't working for iRacing, you'd probably no doubt still be on the service side by side with the rest of us, looking for some of those great on-track experiences that we get.
Oh, certainly, I would be absolutely doing that. In fact, I still do that as much as I can. I love to go out and race and just enjoy the services, working on it. Sometimes, I take vacation days or whatever. My vacation days are spent racing. So, I enjoy the service as much as anybody does. I wish I had a little bit more time to do a little bit more. And I'm certain when the dirt track stuff comes out, you'll see me a lot over there.
Yeah, I figured. I mean, I actually looked back. I don't know if you know, there's a little program called Racing Rivals, and I found that you and I have actually raced 5 times in my weapon of choice in the skippies. I can't remember how the tally went, and that's not just because I think you won them all. But I was going to ask you, do you get much time on the servers, or does the whole work life thing get in the way more than it used to?
Well, it has been lately, and I actually had a foot injury a little bit over this fall, so I was not racing as much. But I love the Skippy car. The Skippy car is about one of my favorite cars on the service, and it's great because I've got a good setup for that. It doesn't take a whole lot to get a good setup. People are friendly. The races happen all the time. It's something that you can just jump in and go. If you get a little bit of seat time, it doesn't take much time to get going again. And I just love racing the Skippy car a lot.
Yeah. Like I said, they're my weapon of choice. That's probably my home on the service, and where you'll find me most times when I'm on there. I saw a tweet the other day that showed you hitting the dirt track. I assumed it was at work, and it made me think about the connection between working for a living and doing what you love for a living, and when that line blurs. Do you reckon you've found, I don't know, that golden ticket, as it were? I mean, I'm not saying every day is like going and being at the chocolate factory, but are you one of the lucky ones, do you think, who's doing what they enjoy for work, where it seems less like the daily 9-to-5 grind that the rest of us might have?
There's a lot of truth in that, because one day, before we started iRacing, I was talking to John, and we were in talking about iRacing, and we were testing some things back then, and we were using NASCAR 2003. And I remember we were in TeamSpeak talking, and there was a bunch of people in there, and somebody was talking about their retirement. And this is after John had hired me, and I said, I'm already retired, because I don't work anymore. This is what I do for fun, and what I'd be doing if I wasn't, working. So, there's a lot of truth in that. And like you said, there can be frustrating days, and there certainly are challenging issues that I take care of as far as the job duties of chief steward go. But I'm very blessed with what I am able to do, and I love iRacing. I love the people at iRacing. I was up in the offices last week, like you said, you saw that tweet, and things like I just enjoy being there. I enjoy everybody there. So it's a great company to work for, and like I said, I'm very blessed to be a part of it.
No, that's awesome. I get that distinct impression from listening to you and seeing what you do around the place. But speaking to you about your job at iRacing, I wanted to obviously talk about that role and probably primarily why I asked you to come on the show. So you're the iRacing chief steward, meaning that you're the guy who adjudicates the protests lodged by the drivers on the iRacing service. Now, myself, I've only ever lodged a couple of protests. I've never, to my knowledge, been on the receiving end, or at least from what I know. Before we get into giving people an understanding of the mechanics of the process, though, I wanted to ask you about your philosophy on it. Based only on my observations, I guess, I get the impression that you really approach the role of steward with a view to essentially educate primarily, whilst perhaps trying to build people up, but at the same time for perhaps the benefit of the community as a whole. And that I kind of had a picture of you being like a wise headmaster overseeing a very big and eclectic student body, and you really want everyone to succeed and look to, I don't know, the phrase I guess is educate before penalising, as it were. Is that the case?
That's the case in the great majority of what I do. We certainly offer a lot of coaching notes, we call them, when somebody is, made a mistake or is acting in a certain way. Our simulation and our product is different than a lot of other games out there, we'll say. Because there can be an atmosphere of people that are playing Battlefield or they're playing any other type of game where they really don't have their experience ruined based on the behavior of other people. Because in general, your goal in the other games is to score by, contest against the other people. Where with iRacing, you have to have cooperation. You have to have, people who race side by side and aren't out to hurt the other guy. They're out to race the other guy. So our product is quite different than most people's experience. So sometime when new people come over to iRacing, they're used to that atmosphere that is in other games, and they'll come over and it'll kind of just translate over for them. So they'll need to be instructed on what iRacing is all about. They'll need to be coached, and they'll need to be let go. So, you're right. In the great majority of what we do, we offer instruction first, but we don't offer a whole lot of instruction. If you're going to go out there and you're going to be malicious against other people, we're going to take care of business, and we're not going to allow that to happen.
Yeah, no, I mean, as a former school teacher myself, I can see a lot of merit in the approach. I mean, it's one thing to arrive ignorant of what goes on, ignorant in a positive way. You just don't know how things are run and won. And as you say, there's a different approach to this sort of game. There's a lot more cooperation on track. You're trying to beat the guy next to you and compete as hard as you can, but at the same token, the catastrophic effects of incidents along the way can take their toll. But look, as a teacher myself in the many moons ago, I can see the education first approach is a really good way to do it. And certainly I wanted to hopefully get that message out to as many iRacers as I can, because as frustrating as it is having your race wrecked by someone else, personally I don't believe there are many folk on the service who do it intentionally. To me, it's like any competitive sport. People are trying to find the limits of their abilities, and sometimes they exceed them, and this, in the case of iRacing, of course, can lead to taking themselves out, but also they can take others out of the competition. And it's also how we learn and improve at the same time. If you don't exceed your limits, you don't learn what they are, and that's what my thinking on it is anyway. I mean, how does that line up with your thinking?
It's definitely true. I think the great majority of people who come onto the service are they're like-minded. They understand what it's about, and they understand that there's other people out here and they don't want to wreck them and things like that. It's very rare that those people need instruction. It's very rare that anybody is out doing anything intentional. And that's the one thing that maybe a lot of people don't understand. You're not going to hear from me if you're out there doing the best you can and you're not trying to intentionally wreck other people. The licensing system that we have and the incident system that we have take care of normal wrecks and normal issues and things like that. The only time that I really get involved is when there is malicious behavior that is towards other people.
Yeah, and that's right. And by and large, I don't think we see a lot of that. So, and I think that's one of the good things about the service. I mean, you got a lot of adults on here. I think the demographic, I don't know if you could tell us about that, but my feeling on it, certainly in the skippies, is the demographic is well, it's mixed, I guess. You got your people starting out and they're going to be all over the age ranges, I guess, but primarily the ones that hang around with me and the skippies, at least, seem to be of an older, more mature demographic. And I guess that speaks to gaming more broadly when I think about it. The demographic of gamers is I guess more like you and me, where we've grown up with it and transitioned into adulthood, still bringing that along with us. But what is the demographic of iRacing like generally? Do you get visibility of that?
I don't, and probably the only reason I don't is because I never really think about it. I would guess that young adults, somewhere in the 20s, young 30s, is where our majority of our customers are. We got a lot of young people on, and we got a lot of older people on too. So I don't know the exact demographics, only because that's just not something I deal with.
Yeah, no worries. It's just something I think about from time to time. But so I wanted to talk to you obviously about lodging protests and some of the mechanics and the processes around it. Can you give our listeners an idea of the process they'll go through if they do find the need to lodge a protest, and some of the things that they should perhaps consider when doing so? What are the things you're looking for in a protest?
Well, first off, if you're in a race and somebody intentionally wrecks you, say you had an incident with somebody and they've retaliated against you in some way. You went down the corner one, and you guys bumped and you spun. You both spun out, and you're driving down the road, and all of a sudden you get hit by 100 mile an hour by a guy that's mad at you. Well, at that point you're welcome to lodge a protest, and what you would do is you would save your replay, and just save the whole replay, and then after the race is over, or when you're done, if you're done at that point, you go out and edit the replay. So you show me, the initial incident, so I can see, okay, there was an incident, and now I have a reason for the retaliation that you're going to show me second. So you're going to send me two replays, one showing the first incident, then one showing the second incident. So I'm clear that there was a first incident, and then this second incident was clearly retaliation. So after you have those two replays, when the race is over, you look at the results, and at the top of the results it says file replay. Now, we do have a 30-minute cooldown period. The reason we have that is because we found that if we didn't, everybody just lodges protests against every little incident. And that's not what the protest system is for. It's for, malicious acts and things like that, and things that we want to see. And we found that if we make people calm down for 30 minutes, then the things that are not malicious are usually not, sent then. So you have to wait for a 30-minute cooldown period. After that, you go to the results, you hit file protest, you fill in a couple pieces of information, a drop-down box that says what you're filing a protest for. You fill in a little description, tell me what happens. You attach those replays. You can get that done in all about 1 minute, and then you hit send, and it sends the protest. I get it in a format that the reason why we use that tool is because I get it in a specific format that has all the information I need, that's formatted to me nicely, so I can just take everything and put it into our CRM program. I can look at the replays. I tell whether I agree that the incident was malicious or not. If I agree, I open a case and I contact the offending member. I look at his history to see whether he's been contacted before or not. If he has not, I'll send him a coaching note. Maybe it's even the second time I'll send him a coaching note. After that, if they continue to behave in such ways, they'll get suspended.
Yeah, look, can I tell you, I think there's a couple of elements there that I wasn't aware of, or that sort of only occurred to me when you were talking. I really like the idea of the 30-minute rule, but also I think that perhaps even that process of going through and reviewing the replay, which I'm sure, the top guys do when they're looking at their incidents and trying to improve on their speed and overall cornering ability and things like that. But the simple matter of going back and reviewing what happened, hopefully from different angles and perspectives on and what happened, I imagine that could really open some people's eyes and hopefully get them thinking more objectively about what went on. Yeah.
Well, as you know, and as I've experienced, and it's in a race car driver's eyes and in the cockpit, you never really know exactly what happened. And the red mist and the red fog hits us all instantly when we get in an accident, and it does everybody. So when you have an accident, you're certain that it wasn't your fault in most cases inside the cockpit, and it happens to me all the time. There's no way I was at fault when I'm inside the cockpit and when I'm driving. Get out, look at the replay, and you'll think, oh, wow, maybe I did squeeze him a little bit too much there, or maybe I did come over, maybe it was my fault a little bit. So you have to go out and you have to look at it after you've cooled down a little bit, and you have to look at the replay from external views to see exactly what happened. It's possible maybe it wasn't your fault, but in a lot of cases, when I look at things, I can see that I had some fault in the incident too.
No, I agree with you. It's certainly something that I do a fair bit, and I've stopped. Oh, I've tried very hard to stop the red mist taking over and hitting the chat button to vent even in the middle of a race. And I know so Matt Malone was on. You probably know Matt from Grip TV. He was on the show last episode, and I got back into streaming, and certainly from my perspective, that's helped me a lot with that, because you don't want to be going off like a frog in a sock after something with 20 people watching or something like that. So certainly that's helped me, but I think that concept of going back and reviewing and trying to get some objective perspective on stuff's really good. Add to that, like I said, the 30-minute wait period, and I think you've got a good system there. But one thing I wanted to talk to you about too, and seeing as I have your undivided attention as well, I'll probably take a privileged opportunity to ask about one thing that I'm interested in with regards to the protesting process. If I were to have one, constructive criticism of the process, it would be around the notifications after a decision's been made. And when I say criticism, I'm going to say that I am coming from a position of ignorance, so I don't know what goes on behind the scenes, which is, I guess, why I'm asking. So, right now, while I got you here, I thought I'd ask about it. So what is the process around notifying people involved in incidents? I mean, both the person, you've talked a little about the person who sort of on the other end, but the person who submitted the protest, how does that work?
Well, the person who submits the protest, they'll get a notification that their protest has been received. After I go through and I look at it, and after I create a case, and after I go through all the processes, first thing, I'll see the protest. And at that point, I will decide whether the protest is valid or not. And it's not that it's not valid sometimes. Say you sent me a protest, and I looked at it, and, when I look at a protest, I have to be 100% convinced that somebody did something intentionally. And I might think that it's possible, but I'm not 100% convinced, so I just don't know. So at that point, I may send you a notification that the protest has been reviewed, and that we're going to basically keep an eye on the guy and see what happened. I could also think that we don't judge incidents as racing deals or not, but we judge whether they were not malicious or not. So if I thought that the incident was not malicious, then I'll also send you a note, saying that we don't think anybody did the act intentionally or not, but we'll still keep an eye on the guy. If I do agree that it was an intentional act and the guy intentionally wrecked you or cussed you out or something like that, I'll open a case. And at that point, you won't get notified or anything like that, but I'll open a case and I'll go through everything and I'll look at everything and I'll document everything, and I will make sure that the other person at that point gets notified and that he gets the ruling in the case. And as soon as the case is closed, then you would get a notification that the case has been closed, that we have taken action. And at that point, you will know, since you got a case closed letter, you'll know that we agreed with your protest and that we've taken some kind of action. We don't tell you exactly what we've done, but we let you know that, action has been taken and the case has been closed. And the reason why we don't go into what exactly has been done, because everybody on the service is a customer, and it's not our goal to humiliate people, and it's not our goal to hurt people in any way. And I know that the person protesting would love to see what's going on, and there's even a need to see what the result was. But in our case, we're it's a competitive sport per se, but it's also people that are customers and that we want to keep customers, and that sometimes, somebody might need suspended, but that doesn't mean they need humiliated or anything like that. So that's why we don't go into details about posting results or giving out results and letting people know exactly what happened. And we, over time, the way we've done it, we think this is the fairest way possible, even though some may agree. Most people see the point of it, but that's why we do it.
No, that's excellent. Thank you, Nim. From my personal perspective, that gives me a lot of confidence, hearing all this firsthand, but also, what I'm hoping to do here today is get more people with that level of understanding directly from you about that, so that, some of the criticism that does come out sometimes, I think, can be washed away with, people understanding about the process. And certainly, that was even my own question when I see people asking it on the forums. I go, well, that's probably an interesting enough question to ask. But certainly in what you're saying there, people should feel confident that, whilst you don't necessarily know the punitive action or the nature of it that was taken, you can be confident that there's a system in place where stuff gets adjudicated on, and when there's action taken, something's happened, but it's in line and consistent with that process. So certainly from my perspective, that's really good to hear. Thank you again for those insights.
Yeah, well, one thing that you can be sure of is that, when you send a protest, you may or may not agree with our ruling. But when you send a protest, you can be sure that if I see something that's malicious against somebody, intentional, against the rules, cheating, anything that is against somebody else unfairly, you can be sure I'm going to take care of it. And a lot of people don't understand, and they'll claim that the protest system does nothing and things like that, and that goes with the territory, and that's fine. But the people that I work for, and I and everybody involved, know that I do my best to make sure that these types of things that we talked about don't happen. And if they do, they go punished, or there might be a better word, but that they are taken care of, because it's just something that I'm not going to allow.
Yeah, mate, and I can hear that in your voice, and I can personally, again, from an observer's point of view, I can see, and I get the real sense that you're committed to doing a job, and you're doing a great job on behalf of the community, mate. So I, for one, am really grateful for that, and I think the culture of the community as a whole is far better for having all that in place. So congratulations on that. Just moving on to something different, I got some listener questions for you. I asked around a few different sources. I said that you were coming on the show, so I've got a couple of questions for you, mate. First one, actually, I thought was interesting. It came from my last guest, Matt Malone, and he wanted to know about the use of the apron for road cars when they're running on oval tracks, but the road course versions of them. I don't know if that's a question that comes up a lot or not, but is that legitimate, or is that something that's frowned upon?
It's a legitimate question, that's for sure, and it's definitely something that some people may be confused about. In fact, a couple of weeks ago when I was up in Boston, I helped Mr. Greg Hill and I worked together to put some cones down on the apron to kind of define where people can race on the road courses and stuff like that. So they'll know now when they go through like Daytona, and if you're running Daytona in the Mazda cars, the Mazda Miatas, I say that because I picture in my head Malone running that car, because he runs that car all the time, and I love watching him in that car. He's an expert in that car. But that car is easy to run around the apron, around the high bank corners. So we don't want people running around the apron, because it's just not fair. It's it's not where people want to be racing on. They want to be racing up on the racetrack. So we do have in the sporting code, it says that you cannot use the apron around high bank corners, and you're not supposed to be doing that. And if people are passing people doing that, they can be suspended for doing so. Matt actually made a quite a good video. Him and I were together, and he has a video up there that people can watch, and it actually it's him and I talking about where you can use the apron and where you can't, because there is no rule against using the apron on straightaways. Anybody can do so, and you can do it as long as you don't cause a wreck by coming off from the apron onto the track. So it's basically looked at as you've went off track and you're coming back on. So if you come back on, you have to do it safely. But the only place that you cannot use the aprons are around the high bank corners of turn 1 and turn 2 and turn 3 and turn 4. And it's basically happens at Daytona, and it also happens at the Charlotte Road Course. So we've put cones up there. They haven't hit release yet, I don't believe, but we put cones up there so people will be able to see where they can and can't race. And it's my idea that if you run through cones, you're not supposed to be there.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that explains it very clearly. Thank you, Nim. And you're right, Matt is a bit of a gun in the in the Mazdas, and I know from speaking to him last time that he got the great opportunity to ride around Road Atlanta, courtesy of iRacing, and that sounded like an amazing experience. So that was awesome. Next question was from Ben Wilkinson from the iRacing Down Under Facebook group. He asked if you take any special approaches with first-time offenders that get protested, and when when he asked, you can picture me holding up my fingers with air quotes here. He was asking on behalf of a friend.
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. We definitely do first-time offenders usually. And the great majority of the time, if they intentionally wreck somebody or if they use some vulgarity on the service, they'll get a note explaining to them the rules of the service and our philosophies on that behavior. Obviously, when somebody signs up to the service, they're told of the rules of the service when they're signing up. But as you and I know, we don't always read everything that we can when we're signing up and excited getting into a new game or whatever. So we understand it can be missed there. But for the great majority of people, we believe that they have a good understanding of the seriousness of this service and the rules of the service. So we do have an exception to where we don't offer coaching and things like that. If somebody comes on the service and they just come on and start destroying races and turning around, going backwards, and they're just wrecking people, they'll be suspended right away. And that'll usually be from all multiplayer services for at least a week, sometimes up to 4 weeks, depending on what they did. That's at my discretion, depending on what I see that they've done. And usually, they'll get a week off, and they'll know at that point what the service is about, because I'll let them know where they can get the rules and what's about. If they were to come back and do anything after that, they'll probably be kicked for good after that, because it's clear that they're not somebody who wants to participate on our service according to the rules that we have laid out. But for a single incident or something like that, gets frustrated, somebody says a cuss word, somebody, retaliates for an incident, they'll definitely get a coaching note first. But I just want to let you know that they can't come on and do anything without getting kicked off right away. iRacing has great trust in me. They've allowed me to basically take each situation as it is and decide. Just because they understand that I care about the service, they understand that I want to see new customers. It benefits us all. But for us to keep customers, we have to provide a certain environment too, and that's what we'll do.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's a couple of things that I wanted to highlight in what you said there. One, I'm a big fan of ruling out swear words or cuss words, as you call them. I'm not a big fan of them myself, and I think that's one key indicator of the tone you're setting on the service, and I applaud you for that. We always want to keep it G-rated, because we've got as we discussed earlier, a broad spectrum of demographics, and particularly in terms of age. And I know that I want to be able to have my kids racing on there free from that sort of thing. So thank you for that. And also there, you mentioned the fact that iRacing have placed a lot of trust with you on that, and I think it's well founded, mate. So congratulations again on that. One final listener question from Edward Foster, again from iRacing Down Under, the Facebook group there. He wanted to know, and I thought this was quite an interesting question, about the sheer volume of protests and what percentage of them are typically not worth lodging. In my mind, I sort of read that, and I'd actually been thinking about asking something along those lines myself, and I was thinking more in particular the second half of that question, that more so than people running amok and being disruptive on the service, you could potentially have as much, if not more, problems with frivolous protests. And when we talked about some of the strategies, the 30-minute rule and reviewing replays to get around that. But what sort of volume do you see typically, and what sort of percentage of the protests do you think are really just maybe emotional responses to simple and honest mistakes?
Well, that's a good question, Edward, and thank you for asking. What we do when we get protests and every day, I guess volume should be the first part. The weekends are the busiest time, Sunday especially, and it's usually people are racing a lot on Sunday and up to Monday, where we switch over to the next week because they want to get their races in, that they procrastinated and they waited too long and they're trying to get their races in. So the weekends and Monday are very, very busy, and when I always like to take a couple of days off on the week, Saturday and Sunday. So I try not to work so much on those times because, you got to take a break. If you don't take a break, you go a little crazy. But when I come in on Monday, there could be upwards of 200 plus protests in there. And luckily, I have the help of Tyler now. So we're lucky to have that. And Tyler's doing a great job with us. And, so I have help now doing that. And you can imagine when all those protests are there on a Monday, and I usually take Monday and Tuesday to get caught up. But I'm looking at replays all day long. I'm loading replays, and that's what I'm doing. I could load 100 replays in a day. And, luckily iRacing supplied me with a computer that loads replays really, really fast. I loaded the Nürburgring the other day in 1 minute and 5 seconds, so I was really happy about that. But
1 minute and 5, jeepers, where do I buy one of those PCs?
Yeah, it's a good thing. It's, so when I'm looking at replays, doing all that, that's kind of a volume idea I can get. Towards the end of the week, it's not so busy. We're coming up on Daytona week. That's a very busy weekend or week for us. So, there's some weeks that are busier, some weeks that aren't. But, usually Mondays and Tuesdays are pretty busy, and it settles down through the week. But the volume can be big, but now we have help, and it's not so bad. Did I answer that question fully?
Yeah, you almost got it all there. I think certainly the volume question. Interested also in what percentage do you think are just mistakes or honest mistakes and emotional responses?
Yeah. Well, say I got 100 protests in. I will usually open up about 40 cases in those 100 protests. Now, that doesn't mean I've turned down 60%. A lot of protests will come in and they will not be complete. They won't have replays, or the replays are not edited properly. So they'll send me a replay that they thought they edited to show me an incident, and it doesn't show me anything at all. Or there's just not enough information, or the information's wrong. For some reason, I would say probably about 20% of the protests that come in are just protests that I can't do because they're not complete in some way. So I would say about half the protests that come in are well-founded protests that I make cases out of, and the other half, 40% are ones that I don't open cases for whatever reason that might be. And like I said, it's not that the other driver wasn't at fault. It's just that I don't believe it was malicious in most cases. And 20% of them are just not filled out correctly or anything like that. And as far as people who, we have a rule stated right there when you protest, that the protests must be well-founded, and you can't be filing frivolous protests. And for the great majority of members, that's not an issue. There have been 1 or 2 cases, maybe 3 or 4, of members who just protest absolutely every little contact that comes across. And, it comes down to a point where I have to have a talk with that person and talk about it. And if they continue to do that, they just don't care, about the process of following the protests. And it's only ever happened. I think it's happened twice, where we've had to just basically say, okay, we're not gonna review those protests anymore from that person. But that's an incredibly rare issue, and for the most part, people do fine with protests.
Yeah, cool. I mean, you got me thinking a lot with that, actually. I first thing, I mean, it might be a heap, very rare cases, sorry, as you say, but it's interesting to hear that the education goes both ways against people that lodge frivolous protests. But I mean, I'm surprised to hear that at first take that, you see 200 protests on a Monday. I thought, gee, that's a high number. But then I thought, well, in the context of the number of races that go on in that period, the number of drivers on there, and you're really only drilling down to however many incidents happen over that time, you're only getting 200. And out of that, I think you said 50 or 50% open a case. And the numbers are really quite small. And that speaks to a pretty positive state for the community, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. And, like I said, the great majority of issues that happen on track are sorted out by the people in the race. They talk about it and they get it sorted out. And, there aren't a lot of malicious acts. And last number I heard, we have about 1,500 races that go off a week. And in that 1,500 races, if I get, 300 to 500 protests, probably, somewhere on average around 400 protests in a week or whatever. And that's just a number off the top of my head. I don't know for sure. But, out of 1,500 races that happen, it's really not that bad. And like you said, half of those, 40% of those are only opened up in cases. So the great majority of, you go in and watch races and things like that, our races really look no different than any race that you would watch on television or any professional race. There's going to be a race. There's going to be a few crashes in each race, and there's going to be people that do well and people that don't. And that's what our simulation offers. It happens. And, whenever somebody's involved in a race, they think the world's going to end, or, they're just really upset about it. But that's part of the experience too. And the racing and the getting involved in crashes and things like that, that's part of motorsports simulations. And most part, people get it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too. To this point, you've described the process and some of the philosophies you have behind it. And one thing that I think is probably potentially the most important element for people to consider out of all this is that of consistency, consistency in decision making based on a solid set of guidelines, both of which, from what I can tell, you have in place. I mean, you've now got some help in your steward role, but primarily you do that on your own. And in my mind, you can't have much more consistent than the same pair of eyeballs looking at all the protests and making those decisions, again based on what I think is a very solid set of principles. So, whether you agree with the outcomes or not, and there's going to be a lot of issues I imagine you see potentially with people just not being able to remove the emotions involved, or not being able to remove themselves enough to be objective in what they see. But so whether you do agree with them or not, I don't think you're going to get more consistent than one and now maybe two people applying that single set of principles. And I know from my point of view that certainly gives me a great deal of confidence, and the work you do is much appreciated, mate. So congratulations on that.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words. And yeah, you're right. To be consistent, you got to have the same brain basically handing out the things. But it's part of the job that you're going to be blamed for not being consistent, just because people don't understand sometimes. And you know what? I don't claim to be perfect either. I certainly make mistakes. I'm a human being just like everybody else. But I do my best to make as fair as ruling as possible. Tyler's aboard now, like you said. I'm training Tyler. He is basically working under iRacing's philosophies also, and he understands the concepts of why we do things, why we don't do things, and what we look for and what we don't. So we're all working under the same guidelines. And if people do not agree with our decision, the person who is penalized can take it to the appeals committee. They overlook everything. They look it over, and then that's a new set of eyes looking at the issue, and then they'll make their ruling whether it goes or not. whether it's upheld or not. And a lot of times, they'll do if somebody is apologetic and if somebody is understanding, they'll cut them a break even though they agreed with the ruling, and that's fine too. And the end goal in all that we do is to have understanding and to get the persons back on the track if they have understanding of what went wrong and it won't happen again.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And hearing all about that today, all about the process and the philosophies and what goes on behind the scenes. And I'm hoping that, through doing this today, that I can add to the understanding of people more broadly. So yeah, thanks again for your time in explaining all that. Now, finally, today, one last thing I've got you lined up to do is to make a run at the top split leaderboard. We're once again at Okayama with the Skip Barber. So if you get ready to get on track, we've got two time laps. So you get your out lap and then 2 time laps, much like many of the qualifying sessions that run in the official races. The time to beat at the moment, it was set by Matt Malone at a 1:45.4. Now Matt got an off track on his second lap that hurt him a bit, but it certainly left the door open for you to take that top rung on the ladder, Nim. So let's get on the server and see how you go.
All right. Well, I don't know if I can beat Matt. Matt's pretty darn good, but we'll give it a try.
Yeah, he is pretty good actually. So let me just hop on board and I'll kick off the recording. Now, those who listened to the last episode know that I had monumental fails with recording the videos, but I'm all set up now. So, mate, when you're ready, just kick on off and we'll get going. There we go, and we're away. Now, I mentioned earlier that I spent some time with you on track in the skips, and you like the skips. Are they one of the more popular cars on the service?
They definitely are. They go off every hour or so, and I'm not going to be able to talk here while I'm driving because I use the keyboard hotkey to talk.
No worries. You probably aren't aware, but I do a Monday night strength of field broadcasting coverage with RTV, and so I'll try and cover for you, mate. Don't feel you got to talk. So, listeners, we're heading up the back straight now into the hairpin for the first time, just on Nim's out lap. And I'm going to try and add a bit of colour to things. I'll take some. Oh, he's run a bit deep there. I'm going to take a different camera angle and show the speedo as we're getting around here. I'm not sure it's completely in sync, but we'll see how we go. Second gear through the infield now, running up into, I think we're up to about turn 9 here. I didn't pull my track map up this time, so I'm going to be struggling a little bit. And here, actually, I'll put your name up on the screen so we know who's driving. How about that? Looking good. Nice livery there. GT ding repairs on the nose, I see. I'll have to ask you about that in a minute. As we head down to the line for the first lap, Nim running the time now. Down into turn 1, drops down into third gear, rounds the nice right-hander. Very nice swooping corner there when you get it right. Stays in third for the left-hander. Interesting. A lot of guys will now, I think they do take that in third a lot. You're right. As we head down to the bottom of the circuit now, hoping to get a good run here. Down into second. Tied in around there. Looking to get a long drive or a long, good run up the main straight up the back there. Hoping to top out and maybe get into fifth by the time you get to the distance markers. There we go. And breaking in and around the flag marshal's stand there down into, he takes the hairpin in second. Interesting tactics there. A lot of guys will take that in first, some in second, but then you don't have to shift up again as you come through the infield section now. Stays in second. Nice bit of, the rear end gets a bit loose there as he grabs a bit of grass on the inside of the corner. Breaks down into first gear now, into the tight left-hander at turn 9 again. Oh, he lights up the rears. Oh, he's off track there. I don't know if you got a 1X there, but the back end of the car's out. So we've got one lap left. Nim, collect your thoughts, mate. Collect your thoughts as we line up the last one. Into third, good. Set up this corner here nicely. A little bit wide of the apex there, but a good run out. Into third, up to fourth. Approaching the line for the second time. Let's have a good strong lap here, Nim. We'll grab a slightly different view here. So we exit turn 1 now. Heading down into turn 2, the left-hander. Again, yeah, nicely just kissing the ripples on the inside. Nice track out there as we head down the hill again to the bottom section of the circuit. Again, very important corner on the track. Longest straight following this corner through second on the gas. Nice and early there. So we head back up the hill down the main straight. And we'll see now. I'll just pull up your time there. No, that was I think the best lap time so far, mate. With the 1X was a 51.1. So looking pretty good. Down to first this time. Better drive out of the corner. A little wide of the apex, it has to be said, but still doing strong. Oh, a bit of dust there. I hope there wasn't a 1X there, Nim, but we'll find out at the end.
It was.
It was. Oh, shattered. I'll tell you what, just a special bonus round. Why don't you do one more lap? And we'll get a time up there. I'm sure no one will begrudge you that. Given all the work you put in for the community, I'm sure we can get away with one more lap. All right, let's set this one up. Holds in third. Nice kiss of the curbs on the inside of the penultimate corner. Around the last corner now. Stays in third. That's all right. We've already had this 1X. Let's get the good run into turn 1 now. Into fourth gear. Topping out at just over 170. Second gear for the first right-hander. Nice exit out of there, Nim. Good use of the track. Comes in again. Little kiss of the curb on the inside of turn 2. Nice work. And up into fourth now. Heading down to the bottom end of the circuit again. Turn 4 now. Brakes just shy of the 50. And down to second. Again, nice tight line through the corner there. This will maximize your exit speed. That's great. Nice exit out of the corner there, Nim. That last lap for reference was a 46 dead. So hopefully we'll improve on that and give Matt a nice run for his money. Those listening or watching at home, who's going to have bragging rights out of this one? This challenging infield section now. Faces Nim again. Nice little kiss of the curb through turn 6 there. Into turn 7. Nice. Manages to keep it off the grass this time using all the track on exit, which is good. Braking a bit past the 50 marker there. Nice tight turn on the inside of turn 8 into turn 9. I had my numbers wrong before, I think. Lights up the rears on the way out. Left a bit of a dark trail on the track there. Nim through third, slightly wide through the penultimate corner. Moves the back out nicely. Gets on the gas. So we head down to cross the line now. We're looking at a time of, what do we got here, Nim? We've got a 1:45.6. A 1:45.6, folks. So where does that leave us? That leaves us, what did I say, Matt? Got a 1:45.4. So he's pipped in him by 0.2.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me. I think I should have been in second gear coming off that last corner, and I was keeping it in third for some reason.
Well, yeah, look, it's interesting you say that because a bit of debate. A lot of people take second. I've managed to keep it in third this season. Well, last couple of seasons, if we've done any time here, because I think iRacing made some change to the baseline setup of the Skippy, and for me, it's allowed me to run higher gears through corners. You're not necessarily going any faster, but I think it helps a little bit on exeter corners in terms of stability, but also in terms of getting the power down. As long as you're within the power band, I think you're doing okay. So, but good lap, mate. I'll stick with the third one there. I'll give you a bit of grace on that one. Like I said, you do a bit for us, so I think I can give you that one.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a while since I've been in this car. I've been driving dirt for a couple months now, and this is quite the different driving style than what dirt takes. So it did take me a couple laps to get used to it. I think one more lap and I'd had Malone, but we don't want to go too crazy. You did give me an extra lap, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, no worries. Of course, talking about dirt like that, you're going to make everyone jealous. So, but I'm sure in good time, people will get their shot at it. Yeah. Um, so look, well done, mate, on the lap. Well done on coming on the show and telling us a lot more about what goes on behind the scenes. And like I said, I think you do a fantastic job. And I hope that getting this message out here today will help people understand a bit more, quieten down some of the noise that you might see that I think is unjustified at times and probably born out of just not knowing. So hopefully we can help in that education process. And thank you so much for your time today. I do really appreciate you making space in what looks to be a very busy schedule. I know we had our challenges along the way to get there, not the least of which is that the time differences between you and I on different points on the globe. So, but yeah, thank you very much for taking time in your schedule out to talk to us. I really appreciate it, mate.
Well, I thank you for the show. I thank you for inviting me on the show and taking the care and the time to, basically educate people and maybe let them know things that I didn't know, and also to be hopefully entertained a little bit. I had a great time with you. I appreciate all your listeners, all the members at iRacing. We're very thankful that you race with us here at iRacing. If you ever have any questions or concerns, please shoot me an email. It's nim.cross@iracing.com. I'd be very, very happy to answer any questions that you might have. And again, we're just thankful that you choose to race with us. And hopefully, you're having fun. And I hope a lot that you really enjoy the dirt tracks that are coming out soon. And I know down in Australia they like their sprint car racing too. So we're very much looking forward to the Australian membership getting involved in the dirt tracks.
No, I'm sure you'll find a nice audience down here for those, mate, and I'm sure they'll be getting on in droves. So, no, thanks again, mate. It's been really great to have you on, and hopefully we might do this again sometime down in the future, mate.
Sounds good. I'd be happy to do so.
Well, folks, what about Nimcross Jr.? Like I said at the top of the show, I was really very impressed with Nim. I was impressed with his thought processes, his experience, and perhaps above all else, his passion for what he's doing at iRacing and in his role there as well. I was very grateful for his openness and willingness to come on the show in the first place. And I can tell you, he was pretty much just as engaging off the air as well. Again, I'm pretty comfortable with having Nim in the steward's chair, and it's also comforting to know a bit more about the philosophies behind the protest system, as well as to be given a pretty good guide on how to go about lodging a protest. Because remember, as Nim was saying, that you're not going to get an outcome, let alone the outcome you're looking for, potentially, if you don't follow that process correctly. So, if you need to go back and listen again and check that out, but, hopefully, let's face it, you never want to be having to lodge a protest in the first place. I guess the biggest takeaway for me, although I think I'm going to put it in the confirmed what I was thinking basket more than that, is that if you are thinking about protesting an incident in a race, the most important question to ask yourself is, was it intentional or was it malicious in nature? I mean, the protest system, as we found out today, is there not to punish folk who just make mistakes, because let's face it, there'd be nobody lining up against you on the track anyway, because we all make those mistakes. It's there to ensure that when we do take the grid, we have the best chance of enjoying this hobby that keeps us coming back time and time again, for the chance to raise our pulse a little bit and test ourselves against the other folk lining up against us who are trying to do the same thing. So hopefully next time you find yourself on the wrong end of an incident while racing, or indeed perhaps just when lining up for your next race, you'll also be a little bit more confident, like me, that the protest system and certainly the chief steward himself have the right approach and the right system in place for what I have no doubt is a really, really tough gig. So thanks again to Nimcross Jr. for coming on the top split. I really did appreciate his time and really enjoyed his company. So thanks again, Nim. Moving on to the on-track action now in the Skip Barber category, of course. There's a ton of stuff going on at the moment. If I start with the official series for Season 1, 2017, we're on the tail end of round 10, if you can believe it, with just 2 weeks remaining after this one. Doesn't time fly? That's all I can say to that. Enzo Kanter is once again leading the way with an even bigger margin, if it's at all possible, than at this stage of the season last time, at least as far as I can remember. He's currently on 1,634 points without even having had the European strength of field races been run yet, although he's into his drop rounds now anyway. He's well over 200 points ahead of his compatriot Valerio Pianetta, who's in second place on 1,407 points. I think this is Valerio's first full season in the Skip Barber cars, or at least it appears to be his first in a very long time, if not. But he's definitely becoming a real championship threat. And from speaking with Enzo, I understand that Valerio has a good chunk of real racing experience, which is absolutely standing him in good stead at the moment. Juan Jose Sanchez, who's a pro World Championship license holder, is sitting in third position on 1,394 points at the moment, and showing that, the skippies really can hold the interest of even the top drivers on the iRacing service, which is really pleasing to see, actually. From there, you have a list of the usual suspects like Philippe Lebert, Arjen de Freda, and Greg Seitz, who fill out spots in the top 10, with the leading Australian-New Zealand club member, of course, once again being Luke Witten, who's on 1,326 points and currently sits in 8th position overall. I think the biggest potential threat to Enzo taking out his third consecutive championship could well be Arjen de Freda, who's currently sitting on 1,389 points in 5th position, but has in fact got only 7 race weeks counting to his score. So throw in the mysteries of drop rounds and some key point scoring opportunities that remain, you may well find that Enzo has a fight on his hands. Leading the way for the Australia-New Zealand club in the official standings, as I said, is Luke Witten. The club standings from there have David Buddha still in second place, with Ben Furhoff in third. Great to see Kevin Henderson and Mick Gray rounding out the top 5 in the current standings, both of them really having strong seasons once again. I now have 8 point scoring rounds after a bit of a hiatus in the middle of the season due to Christmas and general festive season commitments. Like I said, I'm currently sitting in 8th, but I certainly haven't really achieved what I'd hoped for this season, and to be honest, I've already got my eyes on what I might get out of a tilt at next season. Moving to the 2K Cup, I thought I'd take a quick look at that this week, or this episode, I should say. I have to say they are having a bumper season in the Premier Private League for the Skippies. If you've watched any of the coverage, you'll seen 50-plus car fields full of world-class drivers who've been putting on really spectacular races. After 4 rounds, and based on one drop round, you've got Paul Malokis on top of the pops, with series organizer and previous guest on the show and returning champion Philippe Lebert in second, and my dark horse for the official season, Arjen de Freda, in third. Monday Night Lights' favourite Enzo Kanter is in fourth currently, having missed out on taking his first ever race win in that series by, I think it was just about a corner and 300 mils of fuel perhaps at the Summon Point round earlier this season, and Fahim Antonides rounding out the top five. Again, it's great to see Luke Witten representing the Australian New Zealand club at the top level of skip barber racing. He's currently in 10th position in the championship, where the top drivers turn up to race and race for the win. So he's representing us really, really well. Again, I can't stress enough how good the racing has been this season in the 2K Cup, and I recommend you check out the action that you can find either on the 2K Cup threads in the Skip Barber forum on the iRacing site, or check out more detailed information at their site, which is SB for Skip Barber, so sb.2kworldcup.com. 2K World Cup's all one word, so sb.2kworldcup.com. There you'll find links there you'll find all the race results, I should say, and replays from this and previous seasons, as well as pretty much all you could ever want to know about the 2K Cup. On the local front, there's also plenty of action for the skippies, casting a quick eye over Season 7 of the Monday Night Lights Championship, which, as you may be aware, is the competition that I coordinate based around the Australia-New Zealand Strength of Field race on a Monday night each week. We find Ben Furhoff leading the way on 210 points, showing that the expectations that we've had about his pace are really starting to translate into what can be championship winning opportunities. Luke Witten sits in second place on 195 points, with Valerio Pianezza, the leading international driver, who is currently just 1 point behind Luke on 194 in third position. Kevin Henderson, who's found himself surprisingly in the second split on a few occasions this season due to the overwhelming support we get for the series and the increasing strength of the fields overall. But he still finds himself able to be holding down fourth position. And I have to say, it was much to his own surprise earlier in the season. He asked me a few questions about whether or not I had the scoring right, because he was surprised to find himself so far up in the standings, given that I'd said he's been relegated to the second split a few times this season. But that's one of the unique parts of this particular championship. We score points all the way down to the fourth split of official races at the designated strength of field race time. And, guys that do consistently well in whatever split they find themselves in can and do really perform well in the overall standings, as Kevin is showing this season. Perhaps the most surprising element of this season so far is that we find returning champion Enzo Kanter currently in fifth position, and he's working his way up the standings after not having had the best points haul to this point. I'm sure he'll be in the mix as we complete the last two rounds of the season, but he's certainly got his work cut out for him, as he's currently 32 points off the lead, which is more than the value of a race win, more of a total race win, with a bonus point for pole included as well. So he does, though, have a race in hand as well as a 0 point round to drop. So, look, he remains well and truly in the hunt. It'll be exciting to see how it all plays out over the next couple of weeks regardless. If you are interested in joining in the action for that series, all you have to do is turn up, really. You turn up to the 9:15 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Saving Time. Oh, that's a mouthful, isn't it? It's the official Skip Barber race each and every Monday night at that time. And to add some extra excitement to the events, they are broadcast live with the ongoing support of RRTV. Bernie and I commentate the action, and I really think it does add that little extra something to the experience for the guys on track, and I'm really pleased and proud of how the series is going overall. Speaking of well-performing local series, the first season of the Australasian Super Skip series is well underway, as organised by Simon Chambers, who was my first ever guest here on the Top Split, actually. That season is also reaching its closing stages. Looking at the standings there, where there are also 2 weeks remaining, we see Luke Witten once again on top, this time with Fahim Antonides joining us for this series. He's sitting in second place, and Ben Furhoff not far behind in third. Luke's really dominated this series from the outset with 4 victories and 2 second places to his name from the 7 rounds to this point. It really is all done bar the shouting, I'd have to say, with Luke on 173 points and his nearest rival for him, one of the great skippy drivers on the service, it has to be said, he's way back on 108 points. So with only a maximum of 64 points on the table in the remaining rounds, I think it's safe to say, like I said, it's all over bar the shouting. And Luke himself, it has to be said, has a 0-point round in his points haul too. So at this point, I'll be offering my congratulations to Luke, I think. Kevin Willman and Timothy Butler, round out the top 5. And realistically, Ben and Kevin, that's Ben Furhoff and Kevin, really have good chances to rise as high as second position in the championship with good results over the remaining rounds. This series has really gone off with a bang in its first season. Full congratulations to Simon and his team for pulling together something that has really proven to be a top draw card, I should say, on the racing calendar with, no less than 30 plus drivers, 34, 35 drivers turning out for each race. I know that I've been lining up on the grid, and I can say from first-hand experience that the racing is fantastic. Good, hard, clean action, which is exactly why you turn up to race. So if you're interested in taking part in this league for the remainder of this season, or perhaps in season 2 that'll be starting shortly after, do a quick search for Australasian Super Skips in the league section of the iRacing members site, or check out the series thread in the Skip Barber section of the iRacing forums. Check out the league, send in your application. One of us will check it out and get you on the track ASAP. Well, I think that wraps up, or just about wraps up, what I had in mind for this episode. Thanks again for sticking with me this far. I trust you enjoyed it, or perhaps maybe even learned something, or found maybe a new place to go race. Like I said, there's plenty going on in the world of iRacing and in the Skip Barber category, of course. But if you'd like to engage with me or just get in touch, you can find the website at, all one word, thetopsplit.com. Just one word, thetopsplit.com. Although, that may well be how you found this episode, I suppose, so you might already be there. I'm also on Facebook. Just search for all the 3 words separately this time in The Top Split. I'm also back streaming races, including my tilt at the Australasian Super Skips over on the Twitch website. You can find my channel at Flying Hellfish Racing. Just as in like the Simpsons episode. That's Flying Hellfish Racing. Still not sure if I need to convert that over to the Top Split name or the Top Split brand, so I'm still thinking about that. But if you're interested, well, I'd be interested in your feedback on that one if you'd care to reach out. I've also jumped on the Twitter bandwagon after holding off for many a moon. You can find me at AB McKellar. And finally, make sure you check out the Top Split YouTube channel, where I put up the more interesting races that I stream, as well as the back catalogue and current Monday Night Lights broadcasts, courtesy of RTV. I'll also be putting up Nim's Hot Lap video from this episode, but probably, I guess best to check that one on the topsplit.com website, although obviously it'll be hosted on YouTube as well. So there you have it. Another really enjoyable show with a fantastic guest. I know I'm really enjoying pulling these shows together, and if you guys are enjoying this half as much as I am, then it's certainly making this a satisfying little adventure, for want of a better term. Although if you do have any ideas for what you might like to see on the show or guests you might like to hear from, please reach out to me at one of those places I just listed. I'd really love to hear from you. So thank you again for joining me. This has been episode 4 of the Top Split podcast, and I've been your host, Alex McKellar. Until next time, ciao for now.